Sarah Martinez stepped off the military transport bus at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, clutching her duffel bag and trying to ignore the stares from her fellow soldiers. At 22 years old and barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, she looked more like a college student than someone who had just completed the most grueling sniper training program in the United States Army. The summer heat made her uniform stick to her back, but she kept her shoulders straight and her chin up. The whispers started immediately. Sarah had grown used to them over the past 3 years of military service, but they still stung. "Look at the new girl," she heard one soldier mutter to another. "Bet she won't last a week in real combat." Another voice chimed in, "They're letting anyone into the special units these days." Sarah pretended not to hear as she made her way to the barracks. She had heard it all before during basic training, during advanced infantry school, and especially during sniper training. The doubt, the skepticism, the assumption that she was only there to fill some kind of quota. What they didn't know was that Sarah had grown up hunting deer in the mountains of Colorado with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that patience and precision mattered more than size or strength. Her new unit, the 3rd Battalion, was preparing for deployment to Afghanistan. The briefing room was packed with soldiers when Sarah walked in for her first meeting. Captain, a stern-faced man with graying temples, looked up from his papers when she entered. "Martinez, take a seat anywhere," he said without much enthusiasm. Sarah found an empty chair in the back row, aware that every eye in the room was on her. "Listen up," Captain began, spreading a map across the table at the front. "We're heading to the province next month. The terrain is rough, the Taliban presence is significant, and we need every soldier at their absolute best." His eyes swept across the room, pausing briefly on Sarah. "This isn't training anymore. Lives depend on each other out there." Sergeant, a barrel-chested man with arms like tree trunks, raised his hand. "Sir, what about our new sniper? Has she seen actual combat?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to speak up to defend herself, but military protocol demanded she wait for permission. "Martinez has completed all required training," Captain replied curtly. "Her scores speak for themselves." But Sarah could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Even her commanding officer wasn't entirely convinced she belonged there. After the briefing, Sarah tried to integrate with her squad. She sat with them during meals, attempted to join their conversations, and volunteered for extra duties. But the wall between her and the other soldiers remained solid. They were polite enough, following military courtesy, but she could sense their reluctance to fully accept her as one of them. The training exercises at Fort Campbell were intense. Every day brought new challenges designed to prepare them for the harsh realities of combat in Afghanistan. Sarah excelled in the shooting drills, consistently outperforming many of her male counterparts. Her small size actually worked to her advantage in camouflage and concealment exercises. She could squeeze into hiding spots that others couldn't reach and remain motionless for hours while maintaining perfect aim. But marksmanship scores didn't seem to matter to her fellow soldiers. During a particularly challenging urban warfare simulation, Private Jackson, a cocky 20-year-old from Texas, made his feelings clear. "I don't care how good she shoots at targets," he told the others during a break. "When bullets start flying for real, when people are dying around you, that's when you find out who really belongs here." Sarah overheard the comment while checking her equipment nearby. Her hands tightened around her rifle, but she forced herself to stay calm. Getting angry wouldn't prove anything. Only time and performance would show them what she was capable of. The night before their deployment, Sarah sat alone in the barracks, cleaning her rifle for the 100th time. The familiar ritual calmed her nerves and helped her focus. She thought about her grandfather's words from years ago. "Courage isn't about not being afraid, Sarah. It's about doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid." Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister back home in Denver. "Stay safe, sis. Show them what Martinez women are made of." Sarah smiled, feeling a surge of determination. She had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let other people's doubts derail her now. The deployment briefing came early the next morning. Colonel Harrison, the battalion commander, stood before the assembled troops in his dress uniform, his chest decorated with ribbons earned in multiple deployments. He was a legendary figure in the Army, known for his tactical brilliance and unwavering leadership under fire. "You're heading into one of the most dangerous regions in Afghanistan," Colonel Harrison told them, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "The enemy is skilled, determined, and knows the terrain better than you do. Your survival depends on trusting each other completely." His eyes moved across the room, stopping on each soldier individually. Every person in this room has earned their place here through training, dedication, and proven ability. I expect you to act like the professional soldiers you are." Sarah felt a momentary surge of hope that the colonel's words might change her squad's attitude, but the skeptical glances she caught from several soldiers told her otherwise. Respect would have to be earned in the field, not in a briefing room. The flight to Afghanistan was long and uncomfortable. Sarah tried to sleep during the journey, knowing she would need all her energy for what lay ahead. The massive transport plane was filled with equipment, supplies, and nervous energy. Some soldiers played cards, others wrote letters home, and a few just stared out the small windows at the endless expanse of clouds below. When they finally landed at airfield, the heat hit them like a physical wall. The dry, dusty air was unlike anything Sarah had experienced, even during training in desert environments. The base was a bustling hub of military activity, with helicopters taking off and landing constantly, convoys preparing for missions, and soldiers from various units going about their duties. Their forward operating base in Provence was smaller and more austere. Surrounded by towering mountains and situated in a valley that seemed to trap the heat, it felt isolated from the rest of the world. Sarah was assigned to a small room in the barracks, which she shared with two other female soldiers from different units. It wasn't much privacy, but it was better than the open bay arrangements most soldiers endured. The first few weeks were spent on routine patrols and base security. Sarah performed her duties competently, but opportunities to prove herself as a sniper were limited. The other soldiers continued to treat her with professional courtesy but little warmth. She could feel them watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake or show weakness. Everything changed on a hot Tuesday morning in September when their squad received orders for a reconnaissance mission in the mountains near the Pakistan border. Intelligence reports suggested Taliban fighters were using the area to move supplies and weapons. Sarah would finally get her chance to show what she could do in real combat conditions. As they prepared their equipment for the mission, Sergeant pulled Sarah aside. "Martinez, I'm putting you with Johnson and Williams on overwatch," he said, referring to two experienced soldiers. "Stay sharp, follow their lead, and don't do anything heroic. We all want to come home from this one." Sarah nodded, understanding the implicit message. They still didn't trust her judgment completely, but they were willing to give her a chance to prove herself. As she loaded her gear into the helicopter that would take them into the mountains, she whispered a quick prayer and thought about her grandfather. This was her moment to show everyone, including herself, what she was truly made of. The helicopter blades chopped through the thin mountain air as Sarah and her squad approached the landing zone. The terrain below looked like something from another planet, with jagged peaks and deep valleys carved by centuries of wind and water. Sarah checked her equipment one final time, running through the mental checklist her grandfather had taught her years ago. Rifle secure, ammunition counted, scope calibrated, breathing steady. The landing was rough, with the helicopter touching down just long enough for the soldiers to jump out before lifting off again. The sudden silence after the aircraft departed was deafening. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat as Sergeant gathered the squad for final instructions. "Williams and Johnson, take Martinez up to that ridge," said, pointing to a rocky outcrop about 800 meters away. "You'll have clear sight lines down the valley. Stay in radio contact and report anything suspicious." He turned to Sarah with a serious expression. "Martinez, this is your show up there. Williams and Johnson will spot for you and handle communications, but if shooting starts, you're our primary marksman." Sarah felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as she followed Williams and Johnson up the steep mountain path. The thin air made climbing difficult, and the weight of her equipment seemed to increase with every step. Williams, a quiet soldier from Montana with 10 years of experience, set a steady pace without looking back. Johnson, younger but still more experienced than Sarah, kept scanning the surrounding terrain for threats. It took them nearly 2 hours to reach the observation post. The ridge offered a commanding view of the valley below, exactly what they needed for surveillance. Sarah immediately began setting up her position, finding a spot between two large rocks that would provide cover while giving her a clear field of fire. She adjusted her rifle's bipod legs and began scanning the valley through her scope. "Nice position," Williams said quietly, setting up his spotting scope nearby. "You've got good instincts for terrain reading." It was the first compliment Sarah had received from any of her fellow soldiers, and it meant more to her than any medal could have. The first day passed without incident. Sarah maintained her watch while Williams and Johnson rotated duties, one spotting while the other rested or maintained communication with the main squad below. The heat was brutal during the day, but as evening approached, the temperature dropped dramatically. Sarah had trained for these conditions, but experiencing them in a combat zone was different from any exercise. On the second morning, Johnson spotted movement in the valley below. "Got something," he whispered into his radio. "Three figures moving along the tree line about 1,200 meters out." Sarah swung her scope toward the indicated area and found the targets. Three men in traditional Afghan clothing were walking carefully along a path that intelligence reports had identified as a possible smuggling route. "Can you identify weapons?" Williams asked quietly. Sarah studied the figures through her scope, adjusting the magnification to get a better look. One of the men was clearly carrying an AK-47 rifle, and another had what appeared to be an RPG launcher strapped to his back. "Two confirmed weapons," Sarah reported. "AK-47 and possible RPG." The radio crackled with voice from the valley floor. "Maintain observation. Do not engage unless they present an immediate threat to our position." For the next hour, Sarah tracked the three men as they moved through the valley. They stopped frequently to scan the area, clearly aware that American forces were operating in the region. Sarah's training kicked in, and she found herself automatically calculating distances, wind speed, and bullet trajectory. Her grandfather had always said that preparation was the key to success in any challenging situation. The situation changed dramatically when Johnson spotted a much larger group moving through the valley. "We've got at least 15 fighters," he reported urgently. "Full combat gear, heavy weapons, moving toward our squad's position." Sarah shifted her scope and felt her stomach tighten. This was clearly a Taliban force preparing for an attack. Sergeant's voice came over the radio immediately. "All units, we have enemy contact imminent. Overwatch, what's your assessment?" Sarah studied the enemy formation through her scope. They were moving tactically, using cover effectively, and were clearly experienced fighters. "They're setting up an ambush," Sarah reported. "Main group is taking positions in the rocks about 600 meters from your location. They have our squad's route covered." She could see the trap being laid out below her like pieces on a chessboard. "Can you engage?" asked. The question Sarah had been waiting for had finally come. This was her moment to prove herself, but the pressure was enormous. Missing could mean the death of her fellow soldiers. "I have clear shots on multiple targets," Sarah confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Range is 1,100 meters. Wind is light from the east." Williams looked at her with surprise. 1,100 meters was an extremely long shot, even for an experienced sniper. "Take the shot," ordered. "Start with their leader." Sarah had identified the enemy commander earlier, a tall man with a black beard who was directing the other fighters' movements. She settled into her firing position, controlling her breathing just as her grandfather had taught her. The familiar ritual calmed her nerves and sharpened her focus. The shot felt perfect the moment she pulled the trigger. Through her scope, she watched the enemy commander drop to the ground, causing immediate confusion among the other fighters. "Target down," she reported calmly, already shifting to acquire her next target. Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah methodically engaged the enemy fighters from her concealed position. Her accuracy at such extreme range shocked even Williams, who had seen many skilled marksmen during his career. One by one, the Taliban fighters either fell to her shots or broke cover to escape, disrupting their planned ambush completely. "Outstanding shooting," Williams told her as the enemy force scattered. "I've never seen accuracy like that at this range." Johnson nodded in agreement, his earlier skepticism completely gone. For the first time since joining the unit, Sarah felt like she truly belonged. The radio crackled with reports from the valley floor. Squad had successfully avoided the ambush and was now pursuing the remaining enemy fighters. Sarah continued to provide overwatch, but the immediate threat had passed. She had prevented what could have been a devastating attack on her fellow soldiers. When they returned to base 3 days later, word of Sarah's performance had already spread throughout the battalion. The other soldiers who had doubted her abilities now looked at her with new respect. Private Jackson, who had questioned her courage before deployment, approached her in the mess hall. "Martinez, I owe you an apology," he said, extending his hand. "What you did up there saved lives. I was wrong about you." Sarah shook his hand, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She had finally proven herself to the people whose opinions mattered most. Captain called her into his office the next morning. "Martinez, I've been reviewing the after-action reports from your mission," he said, looking at a stack of papers on his desk. 11 confirmed enemy kills at extreme range, 0 friendly casualties, mission objective achieved. That's exceptional work. "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, standing at attention. "I was just doing my job." "No," said, leaning back in his chair. "You were doing much more than that. I'm recommending you for commendation, and I'm also forwarding a report to Colonel Harrison. He likes to know when his soldiers distinguish themselves in combat." Over the following weeks, Sarah participated in several more missions. Her reputation as a skilled marksman grew with each successful operation. The soldiers who had once questioned her presence now actively sought her inclusion in their missions. She had transformed from an outsider to one of the unit's most valuable assets. But Sarah knew that her greatest test was still ahead. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value Taliban commander was operating in their area of operations. This wasn't just any fighter. This was someone the entire coalition had been hunting for months. If they could eliminate or capture this target, it would deal a significant blow to enemy operations in the region. The mission would require everything Sarah had learned about combat, patience, and precision. As she prepared her equipment for what could be the most important assignment of her military career, she thought about how far she had come since that first day at Fort Campbell. The doubts and whispers seemed like ancient history now. She was no longer the underestimated rookie. She was a proven warrior who had earned her place through skill and courage under fire. The mission briefing took place in the secure command bunker at 600 hours on a cold October morning. Colonel Harrison himself was present, which told Sarah everything she needed to know about the importance of this operation. The target was a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. Intelligence indicated he would be meeting with other leaders in a remote village near the Pakistani border. "This is a joint operation," Colonel Harrison explained, pointing to a detailed map spread across the table. "We'll have support from special operations, but the primary responsibility falls on our battalion." His eyes found Sarah in the crowded room. "Martinez, you'll be our designated marksman for this mission. The terrain and distances involved make you our best option for ensuring mission success." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just another patrol or reconnaissance mission. The success or failure of a major operation would depend largely on her skills and judgment. Around the table, she noticed that none of her fellow soldiers showed any signs of doubt about her capabilities. The transformation in their attitudes was complete. Sergeant outlined the tactical plan. "We'll establish 3 observation posts around the target village. Martinez will take the primary position with support from Williams and the shot distance will be approximately 1,400 meters, which pushes the limits of what's possible, but our intelligence indicates it's the only viable firing position." 1,400 meters. Sarah had never attempted a shot at that distance in combat conditions. The mathematics involved were staggering. At that range, she would need to account for bullet drop, wind drift, temperature, altitude, and even the rotation of the Earth. Her grandfather's training had prepared her for the fundamentals, but this would test every skill she had developed. "What's the weather forecast?" Sarah asked, already calculating variables in her head. "Wind conditions will be critical at that distance." "Current reports show light and variable winds," replied Lieutenant, the intelligence officer. "But weather in the mountains can change quickly. You'll need to be prepared to adjust throughout the operation." The team spent the rest of the day preparing equipment and reviewing the mission plan. Sarah worked with the unit's armorer to ensure her rifle was perfectly zeroed and selected her ammunition carefully. Each round was inspected individually. At 1,400 meters, even tiny variations in bullet weight or powder charge could mean the difference between success and failure. A communications specialist who had joined the unit recently would accompany Sarah and Williams to the observation post. Like Sarah, he was still proving himself to the veteran soldiers, but his technical skills were exceptional. "I'll maintain constant communication with all units," he assured her. "If conditions change or if you need to adjust, I'll relay information instantly." They departed the base before dawn, traveling in armored vehicles to within 10 kilometers of the target area. The final approach would be on foot through treacherous mountain terrain. Sarah carried her rifle, ammunition, and essential survival gear, but Williams helped distribute the weight of additional equipment like communications gear and camouflage materials. The climb to the observation post took 5 hours. The mountain paths were barely wide enough for single-file movement, and several sections required technical climbing skills. Sarah's small stature proved advantageous again as she navigated narrow ledges and tight passages that challenged her larger companions. The shooting position was a natural depression in the rocks about 50 meters below the actual mountain peak. It offered excellent concealment while providing clear sight lines to the target village in the valley below. Sarah immediately began setting up her position, using natural features and camouflage netting to create a hide that would be virtually invisible from the village. Range confirmed at 1,420 meters, Williams reported after using his laser rangefinder. Elevation drop is approximately 600 feet. Sarah made notes in her data book, calculating the ballistic adjustments she would need. At this distance, her bullet would drop nearly 12 feet from the point of aim to the target. The village appeared quiet through their optics. Intelligence suggested the meeting would take place in a specific building near the center of the settlement, but they would need to wait for positive identification of their target before taking any action. Sarah settled into her position and began the patient work of observation and preparation that defined sniper operations. Hours passed with no significant activity in the village. Sarah remained motionless behind her rifle, occasionally adjusting her scope to track movement below, but never losing focus on her mission. Williams rotated between his spotting scope and radio communications, while monitored intelligence updates from other units positioned around the target area. Late in the afternoon, vehicles began arriving in the village. Through her scope, Sarah could see several men in military-style clothing gathering near the target building. Her heart rate increased slightly, but she controlled her breathing and maintained her professional focus. Possible target identification, Williams reported quietly into his radio. Multiple military-age males gathering at the primary building. Sarah studied the figures through her scope, comparing what she saw to photographs of that she had memorized during mission preparation. "I need a clearer view of the tall man with the gray beard," Sarah said. Williams adjusted his spotting scope and provided additional details about the target's clothing and movements. After several minutes of careful observation, Sarah was certain. "Positive identification on," she reported. "Target is in the center of a group of approximately 8 individuals in front of the target building." The radio crackled with Colonel Harrison's voice from the command post. "All units, we have positive target identification. Overwatch 1, you are cleared to engage on your discretion." Sarah had been waiting for those words, but now that they came, she felt the enormous responsibility of the moment. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. This was about completing a mission that would save the lives of countless coalition soldiers and Afghan civilians. She settled into her final firing position, making minute adjustments to her scope based on current wind conditions and the precise range to target. At 1,400 meters, she was operating at the absolute limits of her rifle's effective range. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. The target moved into perfect position, standing in an open area with clear background. Sarah controlled her breathing, allowed her heart rate to steady, and began the final sequence her grandfather had taught her years ago in the Colorado mountains. The world seemed to narrow down to just her, the rifle, and the target in her scope. The shot felt perfect from the moment she pulled the trigger. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and she immediately returned to her scope to observe the impact. For what seemed like an eternity, she watched the bullet's path toward the target. At 1,400 meters, it took nearly 2 seconds for the round to reach its destination. "Target down," Williams confirmed through his spotting scope. "Direct hit, target is not moving." The other figures around scattered immediately, some seeking cover while others attempted to provide aid to their fallen leader. Sarah's radio erupted with confirmations from other observation posts and the command center. "Outstanding shot," came Colonel Harrison's voice. "Mission accomplished. All units begin extraction procedures immediately." The extraction was swift and efficient. Within minutes of the successful shot, Sarah and her team were moving away from their position toward the designated pickup zone. The entire operation had been planned with precision, and every element executed flawlessly. Back at the base that evening, Sarah found herself at the center of attention in ways she had never experienced. Soldiers who had barely acknowledged her existence months earlier now sought her out to offer congratulations and ask questions about her shooting techniques. The transformation in her status was complete, and dramatic. Colonel Harrison requested to see her privately in his office. "Martinez," he said as she stood at attention before his desk, "what you accomplished today was extraordinary. A 1,400-meter shot in combat conditions is something most snipers never attempt, much less achieve successfully." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied. "I had excellent support from my team and good intelligence to work with." The colonel smiled at her modest response. "That's exactly the kind of attitude I expect from my best soldiers." He opened a folder on his desk and removed an official document. "I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star Medal, and I'm also approving your request for Advanced Sniper School. But first, there's something else." He picked up his radio and keyed the microphone. "All units, this is Colonel Harrison. I want everyone to understand something about what happened today. The soldier who made that impossible shot, who eliminated a high-value target and dealt a significant blow to enemy operations in this region, is Sergeant Martinez. Some of you may know her by the call sign she earned today through her exceptional marksmanship and cool performance under pressure." Sarah felt her breath catch as the colonel paused dramatically. "From this point forward, Sergeant Martinez will be known by her operational call sign, Black Viper. Any soldier in this battalion who questions her capabilities or commitment is questioning my judgment. Black Viper has proven herself to be one of the finest marksmen I've had the honor to command in 23 years of military service." The radio remained silent for several seconds before responses began coming in from units across the base. "Roger that, sir. Copy, Black Viper confirmed. Outstanding work, Black Viper." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized what had just happened. Colonel Harrison had not just given her a call sign, he had officially and publicly endorsed her as a valued member of the battalion. The days of proving herself were over. She was now Black Viper, respected by her peers and trusted by her commanders. As she walked back to the barracks that evening, soldiers stopped to congratulate her and thank her for the successful mission. Private Jackson approached her with a genuine smile. "Black Viper," he said, extending his hand. "That's a call sign you earned through skill and courage. I'm proud to serve alongside you." Sarah shook his hand, thinking about the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. From the doubts and whispers at Fort Campbell to Colonel Harrison speaking her call sign with obvious pride, she had transformed herself from an underestimated newcomer to a proven warrior. The young woman who had stepped off that transport bus months earlier was gone, replaced by Black Viper, a soldier whose skills and courage had been tested in the crucible of combat and found to be exceptional. That night, as she cleaned her rifle and prepared her equipment for the next day's operations, Sarah thought about her grandfather and the lessons he had taught her in the mountains of Colorado. Patience, precision, and persistence had carried her through every challenge. She had never given up on herself, even when others doubted her abilities. Black Viper was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.